Hello and welcome to the What is Cloud Compute section. So let's go over what cloud compute is exactly. This is pretty much being able to access computers' processors, memories, and operating systems virtually and on demand. You can have multiple of these computers available to you, and mostly they're at a cost. So the types of cloud compute are virtual machines, containers, and serverless generally. Let's go into what each one of those are. So we have virtual machines, which provide complete control over the computing environment. They let you install any software you need and isolate from other users' workloads. This is great to use when you're running traditional applications, needing full operating system access, and testing different operating systems and environments. Meanwhile, and this can be thinking of renting out apartments or separate rooms where you have complete access to the whole room. No one else is there. It's just you being able to do whatever you want. Of course, because it's cloud compute, we can shut it off or and on whenever you want. But the main idea is that this is a room that you have complete access to. Then we have containers. Containers are like these little cubes or cubbies or cubicles, even inside of the environment that are typically lighter than virtual machines, but quicker to set up and also share resources with their neighbors, but they still have a bit of isolation from each other. So think of it as like an office space where you have different cubicles or a cubby where you're storing a bunch of items, but they're all under the same bookshelf. So these things are great because, they have a quick startup time. They tend to be pretty efficient with their resources and they make a really consistent development environments. So that's why some people might say they love Kubernetes because it's a consistent environment that you don't have to worry about things changing nearly as much because it's supposed to be something that you can deploy each and every time with little to no variance unless you influence that or make that influence there depending on what container you're using. Remember, the point of this service is to use it whenever you want to use something in a controlled environment. Sometimes this will be effective when you're using microservices. So microservices are services that are broken down into smaller services, kind of self-explanatory. But think of it kind of like a factory where one person may flip a piece of paper over for the next person who's the next service where they like write down a letter on the page and the next person writes a different letter. So think of that sort of as how microservices are, where each service is a really specific and particular task. Or in continuous deployment scenarios. So continuous deployment scenarios are situations where as soon as something has passed all the tests and it's viable and it's good to go, it automatically gets pushed to users. So in order for it to do that, it might open up new containers and whenever a client or a user wants to use the service again, as soon as it's available, they'll just ship it to a new container with the updated service. And this also works when you really need to scale something quickly, because these containers are pretty fast, pretty quick, and they're easy to develop, easy to launch. And then finally we get to serverless. And serverless, similar to how we talked about it before, is like having someone where you can do it kind of instantly. It's just on an as need basis. There's no real provisioning. It's kind of like if you use Uber Eats or DoorDash or a taxi, you don't really pay for you don't really care about the resources of like the driver waiting or for their next gig or anything like that. You just pay for when you're actually using the service. You pay for when they're delivering your food or the food that's arrived to you or you getting to your destination. So this is automatic scaling, paying per execution, and like no infrastructure management. So this is typically good if you're working with backend APIs or you have events driven workloads. So it's not something where it needs to be up all the time. It's kind of when something happens. And that's kind of a general overview of what cloud compute is being offered on AWS, Google Cloud Practitioner, and Azure, but just kind of what you might be looking for when you're trying to get something for cloud needs.